Hi, my name's Dan. Today we're going to show you how to do a below elbow fiberglass cast. Supplies recommended for this cast are first of all, the stockinette. For an average size arm, we'll use the 2-inch stockinette for the forearm with a slit cut for the thumb, a 1-inch stockinette for the thumb, paper tape, 2 rolls of 2-inch fiberglass is usually enough, 2 rolls of 2-inch cast padding, scissors, and a bucket of warm temperature water. We don't use hot because it can heat up the cast. We don't use cold because it takes too long to dry. So warm temperature water. Prior to starting a cast, there's a few things that you need to do. First is remove the rings from the patients and the bracelets, anything else on their arm. You're also checking the skin to see if there's any open wounds. The other thing that we check is motor and sensory nerve tests before we apply the cast and after we apply the cast. So you ask the patient to go through those tests. Squeeze me. Good. And you can feel me touch here. So before we start the cast, we need to cover the table and the patients. Fiberglass usually stains both, so we start with the cover. So the first thing that I like to do is position the patient properly. So I like the patient facing me directly and having the table high enough that I'm not bending over to cast. Again, I check the ulnar styloid to see if that needs extra padding. This patient definitely needs a little extra. So I take my 2-inch stockinettes. I have a hole cut for the thumb. I apply that by stretching it out, putting the patient's thumb in the little hole that I cut and moving it down the arm. Having a little extra stockinette at the end is okay because that's going to fold over and we can cut that. Again, repositioning the patient to how you want their position is important to be doing that through the whole cast. Next, I take the 1-inch stockinette, putting that over the thumb. Take a piece of the paper tape. I use the tape just to hold down the stockinette. It doesn't need to be tight. It just makes it so it covers all the skin. Then I start with my padding. I anchor it at the wrist. Again, hitting those landmarks. I tear my padding. You can cut it if you wish. So the amount of padding we need is between 2 and 3 layers throughout the cast. So when you work your way down, you overlap the padding by 50% on your way down. I stop the cast 2 finger widths below the crease of the arm. I actually go a little bit higher than 2 finger widths because when the cast is done, we're going to be folding that bit over. On your way up, you just do no overlap of the padding. And that way you end up with, again, 2 to 3 layers of padding. For the ulnar styloid, I take a couple pieces extra and I use my thumb to basically form a little pillow. And that goes right above the ulnar styloid. You can feel the bony prominence there. The other thing I like to do is add a bit of extra padding right at the cuff, and that way when they bend their arm, I fold it, and that way when they bend their arm, it won't rub. So now once you have the padding applied, you reposition the patient's wrist. Open up the fiberglass. I like to put the first roll on dry and the second roll wet. I find that gives me a bit more time to mold the cast. I again anchor it at the wrist. Working your way up, make sure you go underneath the first metacarpal phalangeal joint. Working your way up, not getting too high. So a few different techniques can be done at this area. I like to cut it, having a little less than 1 centimeter width below the thumb, and I like to fold it in. Working your way down. The total amount of fiberglass you need is about 4 layers. So after you apply the first layer of fiberglass, you roll the stockinette up on all ends. If you cut too much stockinette and you have too much, you can always cut it to make it less. The more stockinette you have coming up, the weaker the cast will be. You fold down the thumb layer. The next roll I get wet. This roll I start at the bottom. With my second roll, I get wet in the warm temperature water. This roll I start at the bottom. Working my way up. You want to avoid any wrinkles in the cast, and that's why you have the patient staying at the same position the whole time. So you need to reposition their wrist as you do the cast throughout the whole cast. When you cut these areas, they can be quite frayed, so I fold them back and tuck them in. Same with this side. And then you cut the rest of the roll off. Oops. Now, once you have all the fiberglass and you're happy with it, you can start molding the cast. Basically, you need to flatten the cast down, keeping in mind where the fracture on the arm is, and you need to mold around the fracture. And I'm flattening the cast all the way down. I also like to mold in the palmar crease with my thumb. Alternatively, you can take a wet tensor bandage, and you can wrap that on the cast, and that will allow you to mold a bit quicker. The water will activate the cast material. This can be painful for the patient, so you warn them when you're molding, especially around the wrist. Once you're happy with your mold and the cast is hard, you want to check your landmarks. So as you can see here, we have hit the 2-finger widths. The patient is able to flex their arm without it hitting. It is at the first palmar crease. The patient is able to bend and flex their fingers, and their thumb is completely free to move. Again, finishing off the mold. You need to also check the neurovascular status post-cast, making sure they're able to oppose the thumb and second finger and the thumb and the 5th finger, and they can feel sensation.
During and after cast application, you want to talk to the family about proper cast care. So signs of cast complications to watch out for are swelling and discoloration of the distal limbs, so the fingers, cool fingers, and decreased sensation. Instruct them not to get the cast wet, not to stick anything down it, and to not take the cast off on their own. And also ensure the patient is aware of proper follow-up.